In the crumbling outskirts of an old Victorian town, there stood an antique shop that had long been closed to the public, its windows coated in layers of dust and grime. Despite its uninviting exterior, the shop was a known legend among the locals, particularly because of one peculiar item: a large, ornate mirror with a frame carved from dark, twisted wood, known as the Mirror of Lost Souls. Rumors had it that the mirror did not reflect the present, but showed the faces of people who had mysteriously disappeared from the town over the decades. No one dared to claim ownership, for fear that acknowledging the mirror would draw the lost souls to them. On a dare, a group of teenagers, Alice, Mark, and Jenna, broke into the shop one stormy night. Armed with nothing but flashlights, they tiptoed through the clutter of forgotten relics until they came upon the fabled mirror. It stood, draped in a moth-eaten cloth, an eerie chill surrounding it. "Let's see if it's true," Mark said, his voice a mix of excitement and fear as he pulled the cloth away. The mirror's surface was surprisingly clean, reflecting their anxious faces. They stared, waiting, but nothing happened. "It's just a stupid old mirror," Jenna laughed nervously, her breath fogging up the glass. But as her laughter faded, the glass cleared, and an image slowly emerged. It wasn't Jenna's reflection anymore. Instead, it was a woman they'd never seen, her face twisted in a silent scream. Then another face appeared, and another, each one contorted in horror. The teens backed away, but Alice stood transfixed. The faces were familiar to her. They were people from her childhood stories, those who had vanished without a trace. She reached out, touching the cold glass, her fingertips brushing against a face that suddenly morphed into her own reflection. Alice's heart raced as she turned to tell the others, but Mark and Jenna were no longer there. In their place were their reflections in the mirror, their faces now among the lost, screaming for help. Panicked, Alice tried to run, but found herself facing the mirror again, no matter which way she turned. Desperate, she faced her own reflection once more and watched in horror as it changed. Her face faded into that of an old, wrinkled woman, the original owner of the mirror, known to be a witch who'd cursed the town's people who had shunned her. The witch's voice, like a whisper from the past, filled the room. "Free them and bind yourself," it hissed. Understanding her fate, Alice made a choice. She whispered a promise to remember them, to tell their stories, to ensure they were not forgotten. As she spoke, the screaming faces faded into smiles, one by one, disappearing from the mirror. And with the last face gone, Alice found herself alone in the shop, the mirror now reflecting nothing but the empty room. She walked out as the first hints of dawn crept across the sky, leaving the mirror behind, its curse finally broken. But back in the mirror, in the deepest, darkest corner, a new face appeared. Alice's own, smiling sadly, forever bound to watch over those who might one day peer into the mirror of lost souls, seeking the truth of the lost. In the heart of Vienna stood the opulent Walburg Opera House, a monument to Baroque grandeur, shrouded in velvet and whispered secrets. For decades, it had been haunted by the spectral figure known only as the Maestro, an entity said to be the spirit of a composer whose magnum opus was never performed, his life cut tragically short by a mysterious murder. The story begins with Elise, a talented but nervous soprano, chosen to play the lead in the revival of a long-forgotten opera rumored to be the maestro's lost work. The opera house buzzed with rumors that the specter would finally hear his masterpiece and find peace, allowing the theater to rid itself of the eerie disturbances that plagued it for so long. shadows darting in the wings and chilling melodies heard in the dead of night. As opening night approached, Elise grew increasingly uneasy. She reported hearing haunting whispers and seeing a figure in a dark cloak observing her from the balconies during rehearsals. Despite reassurances from the director, her anxiety peaked. She felt an inexplicable dread that something dreadful awaited her. On the night of the performance, the opera house was packed. The curtain rose to the haunting overture, and as Elise sang, her voice was ethereal, almost otherworldly. The audience was spellbound. During the climax of the opera, as her character succumbed to a tragic fate, Elise felt a cold presence beside her. Turning, she glimpsed the maestro's specter. His eyes filled with tears of joy and sorrow. The final note of the opera was met with thunderous applause. The specter, having heard his life's work finally realized, should have been appeased. However, as the audience called for their star, Elise was nowhere to be found. The cast searched frantically, but found only her costume, neatly folded with a single red rose on top, the maestro's known signature. The police investigation turned up nothing. Elise had vanished into thin air. The opera house closed indefinitely, its legend now darker than ever. Rumors circulated that the maestro had taken Elise to the spectral realm, where she was doomed to perform his opera for eternity. Her voice, the haunting melody that sometimes drifted down from the shuttered opera house to the streets below. Years later, an old manuscript was found in the opera house during renovations. It was the maestro's original score, annotated in the margins with a chilling revelation. The opera was a summoning ritual, the lead soprano a sacrificial offering to restore the composer's life. Elise had not merely disappeared. She had been claimed by the maestro, her soul the final note in his symphony of the damned.